My friends, we are living in a time when the world is trying to redefine your worth. Social media attempts to measure it in likes and followers. Culture attempts to define it by trends and surface appeal. But let me tell you today, your value was never determined by man. It was placed upon you by the hand of God Himself. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Your purpose is divine. Your beauty is eternal, not seasonal. And your worth is not up for negotiation. But there are things, subtle, silent things, that can dim the light God placed within you. Not because you're not valuable, but because when we forget who we are, we begin to accept things we never should. Today, I want to talk about 4 things that can kill your value in front of a man, not because your value disappears, but because you've stopped reflecting it. 1. Compromising your standards. The first thing that begins to kill your value is when you compromise your standards to gain attention or affection. The moment you lower your spiritual and moral guard just to be accepted, you're not showing your value, you're handing it away. You were called to be set apart, not to fit in. A man of substance, a man with a heart aligned with God, will never ask you to give up your identity in Christ to win His interest. When you compromise what you believe, trying to accommodate someone else's preferences, you're dimming the light that God placed within you. If you give away your convictions just to keep someone's company, that's not love, that's bondage. And remember this, what you compromise to get, you'll have to compromise to keep. Don't sell your soul for a temporary embrace. God has better for you. 2. Chasing instead of being chosen. The second thing that diminishes your reflection of value is chasing a man instead of letting yourself be chosen. Hear me. Love was never meant to be chased. It was meant to be mutual. If you're always initiating, always pursuing, always trying to prove yourself worthy to Him, then you are stepping out of divine alignment. God created you as the prize, not the pursuer. In the book of Proverbs, it says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing." That means he is to find you, not the other way around. When you chase, you abandon your posture of grace. You begin to look desperate, and desperation will always attract manipulation. If you're constantly proving, pushing, and pleading, you're not being valued, you're being tolerated. And beloved, you were made for more than just tolerance. You were made for honor. 3. Tolerating disrespect. The third thing that erodes your perceived value is tolerating disrespect. When you allow a man to speak to you harshly, treat you coldly, or walk in and out of your life like it's a revolving door, you are telling him and yourself that your value is negotiable. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow. And when you stay silent in the face of disrespect, you send a message that such behavior is acceptable. But let me remind you, you are a daughter of the Most High. Royal blood flows through your spiritual veins, and royalty does not entertain dishonor. Do not let loneliness cause you to settle. Do not let fear convince you that mistreatment is better than solitude. Your peace is worth protecting, and your worth is worth preserving. You don't need a man to validate you. You need the spirit of discernment to recognize when someone isn't aligned with God's best for your life. 4. Losing yourself in the relationship. Finally, the fourth thing that kills your value in a man's eyes is losing yourself once you're in a relationship. Many women step into love only to forget who they were before they found it. They abandon dreams, silence their voice, and shrink their purpose just to maintain harmony. But hear me. Any relationship that requires you to diminish your God-given identity is not from God. A true relationship doesn't erase you, it elevates you. It doesn't silence you, it celebrates you. It doesn't distract you from purpose, it partners with you in it. When you stop growing, stop dreaming, stop walking in your calling just to keep a man around, you're not in love, you're in bondage. Love is not about becoming less so someone else can feel like more. Real love sees your strength and calls it beautiful. It sees your purpose and says, let's build it together. Ladies, your value was never up for debate. And though the world may try to label you, define you, or confine you, your worth comes from above. You are a daughter of purpose, designed with intentionality and destined for greatness. So do not compromise, do not chase, do not tolerate disrespect, and do not lose yourself, because when you walk in your worth, the right man won't just see your value, he'll rise to meet it. When a woman begins to compromise her spiritual and personal standards to gain the attention or affection of a man, she is gradually eroding the very foundation of her God-given worth. This is not something that happens overnight. It often begins subtly, with little decisions that seem harmless at first, ignoring that small conviction in her spirit, laughing off a comment that didn't sit right with her, agreeing to something she normally wouldn't just to avoid conflict. Each time she does this, she chips away at the truth God has spoken over her life. Standards aren't just rules, they're boundaries that protect our peace, our purpose, and our identity. They are the lines drawn from wisdom, from experience, and most importantly, from divine instruction. When you begin to blur those lines, you open yourself up to being treated according to someone else's idea of your worth, rather than the value God has already declared. God did not create you to be ordinary. He designed you with intentionality, placed purpose within your spirit, and wrote promises over your life before you were even born. That means the standards you carry are not a burden, they are a blessing. They are the evidence of a woman who knows who she is and whose she is. But when you compromise those standards to fit into someone else's world, to match someone else's pace, or to please someone who has not proven they deserve a place in your life, you are essentially handing over the authority of your identity. You are saying, what God said about me isn't enough, so I'll become what you want instead. That, my friend, is the slow unraveling of value, not because it is lost, but because it is no longer being reflected. Relationships are meant to be a reflection of mutual honor and godly connection. A man who truly respects and loves a woman will not ask her to step outside of her boundaries. He will admire her for them. He will see her strength in her refusal to bend, and he will be drawn to the integrity of her heart. A woman who stands on the word of God, who knows her worth, and who refuses to exchange holiness for momentary happiness is not only rare, she is unforgettable. But when she begins to compromise, allowing things she once prayed against, tolerating behavior she once would have called out, and excusing choices that conflict with her convictions, she becomes a shadow of her true self. This is not a judgment, but a call to awaken. The enemy knows he cannot take your value, but if he can convince you to devalue yourself, he wins without a fight. That's why compromise is one of his most effective weapons. It doesn't look dangerous. It looks like subtle flirtation, harmless conversations, or giving the benefit of the doubt when red flags are waving boldly in front of you. He whispers things like, maybe this is the best you'll get, or if you don't accept this, you'll be alone. And before you know it, you've traded your peace for pressure, your standards for survival, your joy for just getting by. God has called you to walk in truth, in power, and in the fullness of your identity. That means you don't have to beg for attention, perform for affection, or sacrifice your values for validation. If a man is truly sent by God, he will not be repelled by your standards. He will be refined by them. He will rise to meet you where you are, not ask you to come down to where he is. Compromise might get you a temporary place in someone's life, but it won't give you a permanent place in their heart. Because anything built on the foundation of compromise will eventually crumble under the weight of your true identity trying to resurface. There's something powerful about a woman who says no, not out of pride, but out of purpose. A woman who doesn't allow her emotions to dictate her decisions. A woman who understands that every yes given to the wrong thing delays the right thing. When you compromise your spiritual standards, you're not just altering your path, you're clouding your discernment. You begin to second guess what you know is right. You start to justify what you once rejected, and slowly you lose sight of the woman you were created to be. This is not about perfection. It's about protection. protecting the anointing on your life, the wisdom in your spirit, and the vision God placed inside you. Every time you compromise, you delay your own destiny. Every time you bend what you believe just to make someone else stay, you are quietly telling God that you trust their opinion more than His promises. But what God has for you will never require you to sin, settle, or shrink. It will stretch you, yes. It may even test you, but it will never require you to compromise who you are in Christ. There is a difference between grace and compromise. Grace says, I understand you're growing. Compromise says, I'll change who I am so you won't leave. And when you operate from a place of fear, fear of being alone, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, you invite counterfeit connections that mimic love but carry none of its weight. Real love does not demand that you abandon your soul to keep it. Real love honors your boundaries, your walk with God, and your standards because it recognizes the glory in your obedience. When a woman starts compromising, she often hopes that her flexibility will lead to favor. That if she just bends a little more, maybe he'll see her worth. But it doesn't work that way. The more you bend for someone who isn't meant for you, the less they respect you. The less they respect you, the more you begin to lose sight of yourself. Before long, you're in a relationship where you no longer feel like you, where your needs are never met, and your soul is quietly screaming for freedom. This is not the kind of relationship God designed for His daughters. His plan for you includes peace, not confusion, honor, not humiliation, growth, not guilt. But to walk in that plan, you must be willing to say, I will not compromise, even if it costs me company. Because anything you have to compromise to get, you'll have to compromise to keep, and that kind of weight is not worth carrying. God has set you apart for a reason. The calling on your life requires clarity, and compromise clouds it. You cannot walk confidently when your spirit is constantly in conflict. You cannot hear God clearly when you're busy silencing His voice to entertain someone else's desires. The strength of a woman is not measured by how much she endures, but by how deeply she stands on the truth, even when it costs her what she thought she wanted. And the truth is this: a man who truly sees your value will never ask you to compromise it. He will cherish it, protect it, and align himself with it. In a world that constantly tells women to prove their worth, many find themselves trapped in a cycle of chasing love instead of being chosen. There is a fundamental difference between showing interest and pursuing someone to the point of losing your dignity. When a woman starts to chase a man, she steps out of her divine position and into a place of emotional exhaustion. She begins to think that if she tries hard enough, gives enough, shows enough, or becomes enough, then maybe, just maybe, he'll finally see her. But true love doesn't need to be chased. It recognizes and responds to value without needing to be convinced. There is something sacred about being pursued. It's a reflection of God's own heart. He pursues His people not out of desperation, but out of deep sacrificial love. That same principle applies in relationships. The right kind of man doesn't wait to be chased. He takes initiative. He steps forward, led by clarity, not confusion. When a woman starts to reverse that design, constantly initiating, constantly calling, constantly trying to maintain a connection that should be mutual, she begins to shift the balance. She becomes the anchor in a ship that the other person isn't even helping sail. The problem with chasing is not just that it's exhausting, it's that it often leads to emotional imbalance. You begin to give 90% while he gives 10%. You plan, you pursue, you maintain, and over time you feel drained. You start to wonder why you're always the one trying, and the answer is simple. You've made yourself too available to someone who hasn't shown he's worthy of access. When you chase, you teach someone that they don't have to put in effort to keep you. They begin to see your presence as guaranteed, not as a privilege. And anything that is guaranteed is often taken for granted. A man who values you will not sit back and wait for you to convince him. He will not need to be begged, prompted, or manipulated into choosing you. A man who has God's heart will recognize your worth and respond to it. not run from it. But when you chase, you give someone a role in your life they haven't earned. You place them on a pedestal, hoping they'll stay, when all along they were never meant to lead. And in doing so, you lose something far more valuable than their attention. You lose your alignment with who God created you to be. Women are nurturers by nature, which makes it easy to give, to care, to try. But there's a fine line between nurturing and negotiating. If you constantly find yourself negotiating your place in someone's life, you're not in a relationship, you're in a transaction. Love does not require you to overextend yourself just to be seen. Love sees you without the performance. It acknowledges your worth without persuasion. It gives freely because it wants to, not because it's being chased. One of the greatest dangers of chasing a man is that it often silences the woman's own discernment. In the rush of trying to win someone over, she starts ignoring warning signs, she excuses red flags, she calls inconsistency being busy, she labels disinterest as he's just going through something. In reality, her heart is trying to fill in the gaps that the other person refuses to bridge. When you chase someone, you often create a version of them in your mind that doesn't match who they truly are. And in doing so, you fall in love with potential, not reality. The woman God designed doesn't need to beg for attention. She doesn't need to run after someone to be loved. She walks with confidence, knowing that the right man will recognize her spirit before her shape, her value before her vulnerability. She is not desperate. She is discerning. She is not available to everyone. She is selective with her time, her energy, her heart. And that kind of woman doesn't need to chase. She understands that what's meant for her will not need to be pursued with desperation, but stewarded with peace. There is something deeply attractive about a woman who knows her worth and refuses to lower herself just to be noticed. When you chase, you step out of rest and into restlessness. You move from grace into striving. You abandon your God-ordained rhythm for a relationship that was never supposed to take that much effort. Relationships require work, yes, but that work should be mutual. If you're the only one calling, texting, planning, adjusting, and giving, you are in something one-sided. And one-sided love isn't love, it's imbalance disguised as affection. Many women chase because they are afraid of being alone, afraid of missing out, afraid that if they don't act fast, someone else will take their place. But fear is a terrible motivator. Anything you pursue out of fear becomes a prison, not a promise. Fear makes you settle. Fear tells you that this is as good as it gets. But God has not given you a spirit of fear. He has given you power, love, and a sound mind. A sound mind doesn't chase people who are running from commitment. A sound mind doesn't beg for love that has to be forced. A sound mind knows when to walk away and trust that better is coming. When a woman stops chasing, she starts attracting the right kind of attention. She shifts from striving to shining. She stops asking, "Am I enough?" and starts declaring, "I am chosen," not because a man said so, but because God already did. Her presence speaks before she even says a word. Her peace is more powerful than her pursuit. She doesn't manipulate, she inspires. She doesn't cling, she trusts. She doesn't chase, she rests in knowing that what's meant for her will find her without force. The pursuit of a man should never come at the cost of your self-respect. If he is not reaching out, making effort, or showing consistency, the message is already clear. Chasing someone who is indifferent will always lead to heartbreak, but waiting on someone who is intentional will lead to joy. The woman who waits, who walks in patience, who trusts God's timing, will always find herself in the right place at the right time with the right person. Because she didn't force it, she allowed God to form it. There is power in stillness. There is strength in waiting. There is beauty in being chosen by someone who sees you as a blessing, not as a burden. And when you stop chasing, you give God the room to bring you someone who won't make you question your worth. He'll bring you someone who sees it, cherishes it, and rises up to meet it. Not because you ran after him, but because you stood firm in who you are. Tolerating disrespect is one of the most silent but destructive ways a woman begins to kill her value in the eyes of a man. It doesn't always start with something dramatic. Often, it begins with subtle words, small dismissals, slight criticisms that are brushed off as jokes or mood swings. At first, it might feel like a misunderstanding or something too minor to address. But over time, what was once unacceptable becomes routine, and what was once shocking becomes familiar. When a woman allows herself to be treated with dishonor and says nothing, does nothing, changes nothing, she teaches the man in her life that her value is negotiable. Respect is the foundation of any relationship worth building. Without it, love becomes manipulation, commitment becomes control, and intimacy becomes obligation. A man who truly sees a woman's worth will handle her heart with care, will guard his words around her, and will never make her feel like she is less than. But when disrespect is allowed to exist unchecked, it grows. It grows in tone, in frequency, in intensity. And soon, what you once would have walked away from becomes something you now excuse on a daily basis. When a woman tolerates disrespect, it doesn't just affect how others view her, it begins to alter how she views herself. Her confidence slowly erodes. She questions her reactions, minimizes her feelings, and begins to accept crumbs when she was meant for a feast. She stops demanding honesty, transparency, kindness, and starts hoping for basic decency. This is not what God intended when He spoke worth and identity over His daughters. He did not create you to be a doormat for someone else's dysfunction. He created you to be a crown, not a burden. A partner, not a punching bag. A light, not a shadow. Disrespect can take many forms. It's not just shouting or insults. It can be silence when communication is needed, withdrawal of affection as punishment, passive-aggressive comments designed to cut. It can be disregard for your time, your values, your dreams. It can be dismissing your emotions as drama, making you feel small for having standards, or mocking your faith and convictions. Every time you let these things slide, you are lowering the bar of how you should be treated. And slowly, you begin to feel that what you're receiving is the best you can expect. God did not design relationships to be battlegrounds for dignity. A relationship should be a sanctuary, a place where you can grow, where you can rest, where your soul is nourished, not wounded. If you constantly have to defend your worth, explain your boundaries, or justify why you deserve respect, then you are in a place that is draining your spirit. The more you tolerate, the less you feel like yourself. And the less you feel like yourself, the harder it becomes to leave what you know is wrong for fear of the unknown. One of the enemy's greatest strategies is to convince you that you're overreacting, that you're too emotional, that if you were just more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, things would change. So you stay hoping, waiting, praying, while your sense of value quietly disappears. Let me tell you, love does not make you feel unsafe. It does not confuse you. It does not hurt you repeatedly and call it growth. There is a difference between being challenged to grow and being disrespected until you break. Some women tolerate disrespect because they've been taught to endure. They've been told that loyalty means staying no matter what. But loyalty is not self-abandonment. You can be loyal to someone without allowing yourself to be dishonored. You can love deeply and still walk away when that love is used against you. Staying in a toxic situation is not a sign of strength. It's often a result of fear disguised as faith. You are not called to carry the weight of someone else's brokenness while sacrificing your wholeness. There is a power that rises in a woman when she decides that being alone is better than being disrespected. When she chooses peace over chaos, healing over hurting, clarity over confusion. That power doesn't come from bitterness, it comes from revelation. The revelation that she is worthy of honor, that her voice matters, that her boundaries are holy, that her heart is not a playground for someone else's immaturity. The truth is, the more you allow, the more you will endure. What begins as one small act of disrespect soon becomes a pattern, a habit, a rhythm in the relationship. And breaking that rhythm requires strength, vision, and courage. Courage to speak up. courage to walk away, courage to believe that God has more for you than constant apology cycles and emotional fatigue. You cannot fix someone who does not see a problem in their behavior. You cannot heal while staying in the very environment that keeps reopening your wounds. It's easy to make excuses for someone when you care deeply for them. It's tempting to hope that time will change them. But patterns speak louder than promises. If someone consistently makes you feel less than, if they tear down your identity, if they use your insecurities against you, that is not love, it is emotional abuse. And the more you stay, the more your heart begins to normalize what should never be normal. You start to believe that maybe you deserve this, maybe this is your fault, maybe if you just loved harder, things would get better. But love is not about losing yourself in an effort to be enough for someone else. Love is about growing together in mutual respect. It is about building something strong, not surviving something broken. If he raises his voice more than he raises your spirit, if he diminishes your voice more than he cherishes your presence, if he belittles you and calls it a joke, then it's time to see the truth. Disrespect is not love in disguise. It's control, it's pride, it's insecurity trying to mask itself as dominance. God is not the author of confusion, nor the designer of relationships built on fear and manipulation. He does not call his daughters to tolerate what grieves his heart. And every time you endure what you were meant to confront, you delay your own healing. You deserve a relationship where respect is the baseline, not the reward, where kindness is consistent, not conditional, where your soul feels safe, not silenced sometimes. Walking away is the most powerful act of faith. It is saying, I trust God to provide better than what I've settled for. It's declaring that your heart, your mind, and your future are worth more than being someone's emotional dumping ground. The longer you stay in disrespect, the harder it becomes to believe that something healthier exists. But it does, and it begins when you decide that you are done accepting less than what God has promised. A woman who no longer tolerates disrespect is a woman who has remembered her value. She doesn't argue to prove her worth. She doesn't fight to be seen. She simply rises, walks away, and lets her absence speak the message her words could not. She understands that silence is sometimes louder than pleading, that walking in dignity leaves a stronger impression than staying in dysfunction ever could. When she chooses to honor herself, she opens the door for something greater, something real, something rooted in truth and love. One of the most heartbreaking ways a woman can lose her value in the eyes of a man is by losing herself in the relationship. It begins with the best of intentions, trying to love deeply, to support fully, to give her all. But somewhere in that giving, she begins to forget who she was before the relationship began. Her dreams begin to dim. Her voice becomes quieter. Her needs fall to the background. Her identity, once firm and vibrant, becomes entangled in who he is, what he wants, and how to keep the relationship alive. What once was a union of two individuals becomes a merger where only one identity survives. When a woman loses herself, she often doesn't realize it right away. It shows up in small sacrifices that don't feel like much at first. Skipping a meeting to be available for him, giving up a hobby that used to bring her joy, allowing his priorities to consistently override hers, ignoring the nudge in her spirit that she's drifting away from her calling. These decisions may appear noble on the surface, even loving, but over time, they chip away at her core. They silence the very parts of her that make her whole. And as she slowly fades in the background of her own life, the man she's trying so hard to hold on to begins to forget why he admired her in the first place at the beginning of a relationship. What often draws a man in is the uniqueness of the woman, the way she lights up when she talks about her passion, her sense of independence, her confidence in who she is. But when that same woman begins to make the relationship her entire identity, when she stops being the woman he fell in love with and starts becoming a mirror of his desires, something shifts, attraction wanes, respect diminishes, and value, not because it has vanished, begins to lose its visibility. What makes a woman magnetic is not just her beauty, but her sense of self. When that self is lost, so too is the spark. God never intended for love to cost a woman her identity. He created relationships as partnerships, not prisons. He designed connection to enhance purpose, not erase it. When a woman begins to forsake her calling, her gifts, her voice, and her individuality to maintain a connection, she is not protecting love, she is abandoning herself. And any love that demands the sacrifice of your soul is not from God. A man who is aligned with God's heart will never be intimidated by your strength. He will not require you to shrink so he can feel big. He will champion your dreams, not compete with them. He will celebrate your growth, not suppress it. It's a dangerous thing when a woman places her entire sense of value in the hands of a man, when his moods determine her joy, when his approval becomes her oxygen, when his love is the only mirror she uses to see herself. Because no human being was designed to carry that kind of weight. And when that man inevitably falters, withdraws, or disappoints, her entire world begins to collapse. She forgets how to stand on her own because she spent so long leaning. She forgets how to dream for herself because she spent so long living through someone else's lens. That is not love. That is codependency disguised as commitment. Losing yourself in a relationship is not always about dramatic changes. Sometimes it looks like silencing your opinions just to keep the peace, pretending to be okay with things that hurt you, laughing at jokes that make you feel small, agreeing to plans that take you further away from your purpose, saying yes when your heart is screaming no. Every time you betray yourself for the sake of the relationship, you weaken the bond you have with yourself. And when your relationship with yourself is damaged, every other relationship suffers too. There is nothing wrong with compromise in love. But compromise should never come at the cost of character. It should never demand that you bury your brilliance just to make someone else comfortable. A woman who walks in her purpose, who guards her peace, who honors her own heart, is not difficult. She is divine. She is operating from a place of alignment. And any man who truly sees her will not ask her to sacrifice that. He will protect it, nurture it, and walk beside her, not ahead of her, not over her, but with her. One of the most dangerous lies a woman can believe is that being easygoing and agreeable will keep a man. That if she just becomes what he wants, he won't leave. But the truth is, love rooted in performance is not love, it's survival. And survival is not the environment in which purpose thrives. A relationship that is built on the fear of abandonment will always lead to self-erasure. It becomes a cycle of overgiving, overcompensating, and over-explaining. The woman becomes so focused on being what he needs that she forgets what she needs. And eventually, resentment takes root where love once lived. When a woman loses herself, she often finds that the relationship no longer satisfies her. Because deep within her soul, there is a longing to be seen as she truly is, not as a version molded to keep someone else comfortable. She begins to crave the freedom to express, to grow, to dream again. She starts to miss the fire she once carried, the confidence she used to wear like armor. That ache is not a sign of failure, it's a call to return, to come back to the identity that God placed within her, to rediscover the woman who existed before the relationship began, to reclaim her voice, her purpose, her power. Relationships are meant to be a place where two whole people come together to build something greater. When one person has to shrink for the other to thrive, the relationship becomes lopsided and unhealthy. Wholeness cannot be sacrificed for togetherness. A man who is secure in himself will never be threatened by a woman who knows her worth. He will not require her to dim her light. He will position himself to reflect it. And when a woman refuses to lose herself, she protects not only her own soul, but the integrity of the relationship itself. There is something deeply beautiful about a woman who stays rooted in her identity, no matter what season she's in. Whether single, dating, or married, she carries the same essence. She does not morph into who people expect her to be. She shows up fully, authentically, and unapologetically, and in doing so, she sets the standard for how she will be treated. She does not allow love to cost her purpose. She does not allow romance to distract her from her calling. She understands that the man who is truly for her will never require her to lose herself in order to be with him. When a woman knows who she is, she moves differently. She doesn't beg for affection. She doesn't overextend herself to prove her worth. She doesn't panic when someone pulls away. She knows that losing someone else is never worth losing herself. She lives from a place of abundance, not desperation. She walks in peace, not pressure. And that presence, that unwavering, grounded, radiant presence, is what sets her apart in a world full of people chasing validation. It is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is not rebellion. It is remembrance of who she was created to be.